Every year there are a few wide receivers in fantasy football who look great on the surface until you actually dig in more. And that's exactly what this video is going to do. Dig in more, because I don't want you wasting a 3rd, 4th, or 5th round fantasy pick on one of these wide receivers who could bust. Just let your friends and league mates take those players instead. Now, I've been making videos like this for 7 years to help fantasy players dominate their drafts, and we're going to do it again today for you. And we're starting with the Seahawks' #1 receiver, Jackson Smith-Njigba. And I know what you're saying right now. There was an audible gasp by a couple of people watching this. I heard it from all the way. You're tuning in from another country, a different state. I heard that. Because I get it. On paper, JSN, he was a breakout star last year. It looks like he's going to have even more volume this year after that impressive 2024, so things are looking up. If you look at the actual stats, JSN ranks 7th in the NFL in receptions with 100. He was one of only 8 wide receivers, because a couple had 100 exactly, to hit 100 receptions. He was top 10 in receiving yards, top 10 in yards after the catch. This guy averaged 15 fantasy points per game in an offense last year that did have Tyler Lockett, that did have DK Metcalf, and now those guys are gone. Isn't this a good thing? Yes, in theory, all of those things are good, but there's a lot of other elements here at play. More context that needs to be added, especially what people and nobody is talking about. Jackson Smith-Njigba last year was a dominant slot wide receiver. 74% of his snaps were in the slot. 701 slot snaps, was #1 in the NFL last year. He was a great wide receiver. We know this. He dominated from the slot, and actually 88% of his receiving yards last year came from the slot. Okay, that's cool, but now here's the issue coming into 2025. He led the NFL in receiving yards from the slot. This is what the 33rd team says. We just kind of mentioned that. He was #1, as you can see right here, 993 from the slot, over 150 more nearly, or over 200 more than any other wide receiver, Ladd McConkey being there, a bunch of more yards than Drake London, out of the slot, an elite wide receiver last year as well. So all of this is good. He is great out of the slot, but that role is going to be changing this year, because DK Metcalf is now gone from this team, an outside receiver. Tyler Lockett is now gone from this team, played outside last year when JSN was in the slot, and who they added was Cooper Kupp and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Based on the current setup of this Seahawks team, you're going to get Marquez Valdes-Scantling or the rookie Torrey Horton in the later rounds on the outside, and you're probably getting JSN bumping a lot more out to the outside because you have a 32-year-old Cooper Kupp in the slot. Now, don't get it twisted. Cooper Kupp can definitely play outside wide receiver, and he definitely will this year, but I think predominantly you're going to see JSN, who only played last year about 25% of his snaps, only 12% of his yards came from the outside. He's probably getting bumped outside more than the aging Cooper Kupp, who's already struggling to separate not only on the outside, but also in the slot. And the problem for JSN is that when he was put to the outside last year, again, it wasn't his role, so we have to give him some slack. He wasn't meant to be there, some DK Metcalf injuries and things like that, but it wasn't all that successful. This was a really helpful tweet on Twitter from Data Roamer. You can check them out. JSN in the slot versus out wide in 2024. In the slot, we talked about how great it was. He was earning 23% targets per route run. He had over a 2 yards per route run. That's great. Then he goes to the outside, earns 20% targets per route run. Makes sense. He's still earning a lot because there just wasn't guys on this team when DK Metcalf got hurt. Only 1.44 yards per route run. So overall, his efficiency is dropping by, like 35 to 40%. Again, it's a somewhat small sample, but he's just not as good of an outside receiver. We know that dating back to college. He was basically only a slot wide receiver at Ohio State. That's what he got drafted to the NFL to do, and that's what he's done so far. Now, this doesn't mean that JSN can't produce on the outside, but it's just a risk that we haven't seen yet. And I'd rather not spend a top 30 pick where he currently goes in fantasy drafts, 29th overall, a top 12 wide receiver right now, going ahead of proven guys like Garrett Wilson, who are seeing 150 targets a year, T. Higgins, who was a top 5 wide receiver last year, Devontae Adams, who year in and year out is a top 12 receiver no matter the situation, right? Wide receiver ones on some other teams like Mike Evans, DJ Moore, Rashee Rice, Cortland Sutton, right? All these other guys, in my opinion, in one way or another, are similar or better definitely at value than a JSN right now. And this role change is just the beginning of the changes JSN should see in 2025. Because he also has a new play caller coming in with Ryan Grubb gone, and that's probably good. Ryan Grubb wasn't great last year, but he also has a new quarterback as well. Now, that coordinator is going to be Clint Kubiak. Clint Kubiak, who is somebody who really likes to kind of work in the short to intermediate parts of the field. He will check it down to running backs and tight ends and slot receivers a lot. You can see right here, Clint Kubiak was recently asked on his outside zone scheme, throwing the ball to the running backs and Kenneth Walker. Looking forward to get him in the scheme, and we're going to get a lot out of this guy in the passing attack, right? That's kind of just a quiet thumbs up for Kenneth Walker, and people are making a lot out of an ankle injury that's happening in June. Don't worry about that for Kenneth. But we just saw this last year in a Clint Kubiak offense with the Saints. We saw Chris Olave being run over the middle of the field a lot into those short to intermediate parts of the field. Obviously, their running back, Alvin Kamara, is heavily involved in the passing attack. I think you're going to see that again this year, which could favor like Cooper Kupp and the running backs. And then there's the change from going to Geno Smith to Sam Darnold, both who had solid years last year. I would say, though, that in general, when you're getting a new player coming in with a new system, it's not going to be all that seamless. It might be pretty rocky, if not the entire year, at least for some weeks. And not to mention, JSN last year, despite having DK Metcalf and to some extent Tyler Lockett taking attention away that won't be there this year, he wasn't even all that efficient last year. He ranked outside the top 40 receivers in yards per route run and outside the top 75 receivers in yards per reception. I mean, last year he wasn't working downfield much, which makes sense because he was in the slot. So now can we trust this guy to get a new role on the outside more, with a new play caller, with a new quarterback, all of those things? He's a talented player, don't get me wrong, but is there going to be some inconsistencies that don't make him worthy of being taken where he is right now? If we look at it across, we looked at his ADP next to wide receivers earlier, across different positions. He's going next to guys like Chase Brown, a great running back option at that point in the draft, some stud quarterbacks in Jaden Daniels. You scroll a little bit more, there's those quarterbacks or the wide receivers we talked about, T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson, right? All these guys. Scroll even more down the list right now. Kenneth Walker is going way after him, his teammate across different positions. Crazy. George Kittle is going way after him. There's no way I'm passing on George Kittle at value and taking JSN instead. There's way less red flags for Kittle. I don't know how you take JSN with the top 30 pick. I also find it really hard right now to be taking Terry McLaurin despite his monster 2024 season. We're not drafting for last year. We're drafting for what's happening this year, and some things and really a lot of things are changing. Now, if we did look at that season last year and why your friends are going to be saying that they want to take him, you had 82 receptions, second most of his career, over 1,000 receiving yards for yet another season. But here's the big thing that happened for Terry McLaurin and the reason why he finished as nearly a top 12 wide receiver 14 overall, 15.8 fantasy points per game. Look at this, 13 touchdowns instead of every other year where he's scoring 4 or 5 or 6 or 5 in those seasons. So the big thing here for Terry McLaurin was he started to find the end zone, which makes sense. He had a better quarterback in Jaden Daniels, but here's why it's not sustainable. Terry McLaurin's touchdown rate last year was 15.5%. I almost want to scream, this is so crazy. He ranks second in the NFL with 13 receiving touchdowns. 15.5% is insane. Just for some reference, never before in Terry McLaurin's career did he top a 6% touchdown rate. The NFL average is around a 5 to 6 to 7% touchdown rate. He had 2 to 3 times the NFL average. Check this out. In 2020, his touchdown rate was just 4.5%. 2021, 6.4. 2022, 6. 2023, 6.3. And as you can see in 2024, it was 15.5%. Which one of those ones that you just saw on the screen, which one's the outlier? It's the one from last season. And it's not like he suddenly became some red zone weapon in the offense with Cliff Kingsbury calling the plays and Jaden Daniels as his quarterback. No, it wasn't that at all. Because Terry McLaurin only had 15 red zone targets last year. It's not like he was Jamar Chase or Drake London and seeing these elite red zone roles. He was 18th amongst wide receivers. That's just average in your red zone role for a number one receiver, but he turned that into 13 touchdowns, which again is just not all that sustainable. Especially, it's not all that sustainable for a couple of reasons. First off, it's not like he was seeing any type of elite target volume. 6.9 targets per game. He ranked just 34th in target share in the NFL, only earning 23% of his team's targets. To be an elite target hog wide receiver, you probably got to be closer to 25 to 27+%. So basically, this is an outlier. He had a touchdown spike season despite not seeing an increase in target volume or seeing an increase in his overall red zone usage. And what's even more concerning is that this year that volume could even drop again. Because in 2024, McLaurin ran the second fewest routes of his career as he ages, only running 515 routes last year. And I mention as he ages because he was coming off of the field for little nicks and bruises, and now he's going to be turning 30 years old this season right now, and he's going to have some legit competition for really the first time in his career. If we look at this, you're seeing Omodid Zaccheaus and Diami Brown leaving this offense, and you're seeing Deebo Samuel, probably the best wide receiver that Terry McLaurin has ever played with in the NFL, coming in. They drafted Jalen Lane in the 4th round. We'll see what happens with some other pieces on this offense, like they added Michael Gallup if he has anything left. But the biggest thing here is that they have Deebo Samuel in this offense right now, who is probably and could threaten to see somewhere around the 20% target share compared to the guys last year. That was never happening. And Deebo Samuel fits really well into the Cliff Kingsbury offense, right? You're just talking about kind of a play action pass, a quick screen out to the wide receiver. That's going to be going to Deebo over at Terry McLaurin. And let's not forget about the contract issues for McLaurin right now. I mean, odds are they end up paying the guy by the time the season starts because they really need him. But right now, Terry McLaurin made it clear to the team that he's frustrated with the lack of progress on a long-term deal. He basically said that he's not going to be coming to any of the workouts. He's not going to show up to voluntary OTAs and minicamp. He's not going to show up to mandatory minicamp. We'll probably won't even see him at training camp as of right now if he doesn't get a deal. Now, maybe by the time you're watching this, he gets a deal and that's all fine. But at least as of this recording, it's not great that he's not out there getting even more reps, staying in shape. A lot of times when people hold out, they end up being more susceptible to injuries if they're not staying loose and playing up to NFL speed in camp. So McLaurin right now going as the wide receiver 16. He goes next to T. Higgins. Give me T. Higgins all day long. He goes ahead of Mike Evans and Devontae Adams and Rashee Rice and Courtland Sutton. I want those guys at value all day long, and even guys across different positions. Again, I do not hate Jackson Smith-Njigba. I do not hate Terry McLaurin. Based on where they currently go in drafts, and this is is the whole game. This is the whole game of fantasy football drafts. They are not as good of values as other players. And if you want to know exactly how you should draft the top 50 players, those first 4 to 5 rounds of your drafts, I'm giving away to you my free top 50 overall rankings. It has tiers. It shows you the best and worst values in the draft as well. You can check it out. It's free. Link down below right now for a limited time, or you can head to fantasyrankingsfree.com. That's fantasyrankingsfree.com to go get your top 50 overall. And if you want to take it a step even further and get my full top 250 rankings and all my draft tools and all my in-season tools for an entire year, access to me in a Discord chat as well, well, you can sign up for the Fantasy Blueprint. That is linked down below. It's what I use in every single one of my drafts, and over 10,000 people used it last year to help them dominate their leagues. If you want to feel confident going into your fantasy draft, if every single week of the year you want to have bragging rights over your friends because you're just smacking them around, well, that's what the Fantasy Blueprint will help you do. You can check it out with the link in the description, or just head to jointheblueprint.com. That is jointheblueprint.com if you want to smack around your friends this year. All right, the next wide receiver we're talking about is Xavier Worthy. And Xavier Worthy, he's an electric player. I'm here based in Austin, Texas, and I know firsthand experience that this guy is extremely fast. I wasn't shocked to see him blaze the combine when he went there a year ago. And in his rookie year, he was actually pretty good. And maybe that makes you trust this analysis even more, because I love Xavier Worthy dating back to college. Watched him firsthand. Love that he went in the first round. Love that he went to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I still don't like him in fantasy as of right now this year. And I say as of right now because, of course, news can change, and that can change the role on if something happens to Rashee Rice or somebody else, right? So look at this right here. Xavier Worthy last year, he was great. He was great to close out 2024, and we'll get into those splits in a second. But of course, to close out 2024, he didn't have Rashee Rice that entire time. He didn't have Marquise Brown. He had a Travis Kelce who was clearly at that point in the season being limited for their playoff run to have whatever juice he had left for that playoff run. And here's what we actually saw. We saw over the second half of the season, week 11 to 18, after he ends up getting a lot more experience in the NFL, Xavier Worthy starts to take off. Worthy started being used in the slot more, and over those final 8 games, he averaged 13.6 fantasy points per game. He was the wide receiver 31. He was seeing 49 receiving yards per game, 6.9 targets per game. So overall, this was like solid usage. But let me just say that again. He wasn't even seeing 50 yards per game. He wasn't even a top 30 wide receiver during that time. And now in fantasy drafts, he's easily going as a top 30 and a top 24 wide receiver, despite him not producing those numbers last year and now having much more competition to deal with this year. Because surprise, surprise, Rashee Rice is already back healthy in mini camps and in practices, and he looks like he's going to be 100%. Rashee Rice, somebody who last year when healthy absolutely dominated football. This is a guy who Rashee Rice was averaging 21 fantasy points per game, was second in targets, was the clear #1 receiver on this team, creating explosive plays often out of the slot due to his yards after the catch ability. That was the role that Xavier Worthy saw the second half of the year. He's not going to see it with Rashee Rice back. So if that was the case, in those first 10 weeks of the year for Xavier Worthy, or the first 9 weeks, as you can see right here, when Rashee Rice was healthy for some of that time, you're getting Xavier Worthy when he was playing on the outside, only averaging 8.7 fantasy points per game, right? I mean, that's a production that's outside the top 70 receivers, only having 27 receiving yards per game on 4.7 targets per game. I'm not going to say he's going to go back to that because now he has some NFL experience. They're more incentivized to put him into the playbook more since he showed he could do it last year, including the playoffs. But what I am saying is you probably shouldn't just automatically expect 14 fantasy points a game. You should probably expect something closer to maybe 11 or 12, which means he's not even a top 36 receiver, but he's going as a top 24 one. And when you really look at it last year, and yes, he was a rookie, but he's going high in fantasy drafts, so we have to comb through this with a fine comb or a fine needle, whatever the saying is. What is even the saying? Who cares? Anyways, let's look at his efficiency last year because it was somewhat rough. He was 76th in yards per route run. He ranked 70th in explosive plays of 10 plus yards and 76th in contested catch rating. Now, I bring those things up because this Chiefs offense needs explosive plays. Maybe it'll be Isaiah Pacheco coming off of injury. Probably will be Rashee Rice. Maybe Marquise Brown coming off of injury. We just saw Worthy couldn't do it last year, and he couldn't win contested catches on the outside, and now he's going to have to go back out there and do it again because Rashee Rice is back. Along with Rashee Rice being back, we're also getting Marquise Brown being back, who's still just 28 years old. He just turned 28. This is a guy last year in his final 2 regular season games. He actually was able to come in and average 7.5 targets per game. Clearly wasn't 100% healthy. We'll see now that they brought him back on a 1-year deal again, what he could do for the Chiefs this year. And as for Rashee Rice, just dating back to the season before, so not even just looking at his 3 games where he dominated last year, he's always had better numbers than Xavier Worthy, what he even showed towards his good part of the year last year. Let's check it out. He's had a better route win rate and better EPA, that's expected points added, than Xavier Worthy in every single category when it comes to targets, receptions, and yards after the catch. So when I factor all of this in, it's really difficult for me to want to take Xavier Worthy, who to me is the clear #2 option, if that, right? Maybe Kelce gets a resurgence, but probably #2 option on his team. And I'm taking him ahead of guys like Ted McMillan, a clear #1 on his team. Heck, Chris Godwin, I don't really like right now, but for a discount, the #2 option on his team, sure. #2 option on his team, George Pickens way later in drafts, and Jordan Addison, and Chris Olave, the #1 1 on his team, and Jawan Jennings the number 1 to start the year. If Brandon Ayuk misses time on his team, Kyle Brindley number 1 on his team, you're getting this. That's just at the wide receiver position alone. I just don't really see the upside right now that we're going out there and trying to draft Xavier Worthy for. And honestly, a lot of similar things could be said for Zay Flowers, who I think is good. That's not the issue. We know he's good. He's in the NFL as a number 1 wide receiver, former first-round pick, and he's produced each year. But everything right now, in my opinion, is just working against him actually paying off where he's going in 2025 drafts. So last year, Zay Flowers, once again, he finished almost like as a similar season, just 4 and 5 touchdowns his first 2 years, 12.3 fantasy points last year, 12.9 in his rookie year. He got a Pro Bowl nod, sure. And if you scroll over to it, his overall production, when you're looking at how he was being used in this offense, was solid. Top 20 in targets, 6.8 per game, a 25.7% target share, is a true number 1 receiver type target share, top 20 in the NFL. The problem is, it's the volume. You're in this Ravens running attack with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. They're going to do it again this year. So your volume, even though you're seeing a 26%, 27% target share week in and week out, it's only leading to like 5-6 target games. And that can kind of just all be summed up to this right here. His routes run, he was only running 26 routes per game, 37th in the NFL. This is because they're not running a lot of plays. And when they do, even when they do run those plays, you're just not getting him out on the field as much as you wish he would be if he was a like true number 1 receiver. If we pull up the Ravens offense last year, this is what you see. You see this is sorted right now by rushing yards per game. So they ranked number 1 in rushing plays per game. They ranked bottom 2 in pass attempts per game overall, which is just not great, right? So this is a team that ranks 2nd in rush attempts, 1st in rushing yards, 2nd worst in pass attempts per game. We know that. If you just think about this offense, it makes sense, but it doesn't help their passing attack and their wide receivers. And what makes this even crazier is that Lamar Jackson, they had the MVP quarterback. They were extremely efficient because this dude, despite throwing the 2nd fewest times in the league as a team, he had 41 touchdown passes last year, right? 17 more than the previous year. This 41 is an outlier, especially when you're not throwing a lot. His touchdown rate was like double to triple the NFL average. What does that mean? Well, let's just say that Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry continue to do what they do and run the ball a lot. Now you're going to get the same low pass volume offense and probably going to get regression on the touchdowns, which hurts all of the receivers and Zay Flowers even more. You also then throw in that this is probably the most competition Zay Flowers has had in his 3-year career. The team just re-signed Rashad Bateman after he had a quietly solid year last year. They gave him a 3-year, $37 million extension. Believe it or not, he posted more touchdowns, a higher dominator rating, and 16 yards per reception last year. All of those things from a touchdown to a dominator rating perspective were more than Zay Flowers. Then you get the fact that they bring in DeAndre Hopkins, who sure, he's older right now, the veteran, but apparently he looks good in camp. He still was able to put up over 600 yards, 5 touchdowns last year. Also had a better dominator rating yet again than one Zay Flowers. And if you're not familiar, dominator rating is how much of your team's total yardage, receptions, and touchdowns you account for percentage-wise, and Rashad Bateman was above that on the same team as Flowers last year. And of course, let's not forget, I've already mentioned it, but Derrick Henry's going to run the ball a ton. Lamar Jackson's going to run the ball a ton, right? And then let's not sleep on the fact that this is the best tight end room in football, most likely. Probably has 2 top 10, arguably top 10, 2 tight ends in the league. At worst, 2 top 12 tight ends in the league. They're going to be coming back. They're definitely going to be using the red zone like we saw for both of these guys last year. So I don't want to say there's too many mouths to feed because none of these guys are like elite talents for Zay Flowers to compete with at this point in DeAndre Hopkins' career, but they're all good enough that when you're not throwing the ball a ton, it's going to hurt Flowers. Now that's me focusing on all the downsides. The upsides is that Flowers is still the number 1 in this offense, had a 26% target share last year, ranked top 5 in explosive play rating, and he's still going to be attached to the MVP Lamar Jackson. But I'm just concerned that the efficiency dips are going to probably be there from a touchdown perspective. There's more added competition. We've never seen Zay Flowers always be this dominant, consistent wide receiver, like maybe for a stretch of 3 to 4 games, and now he's going high in drafts yet again. Zay Flowers currently goes as the wide receiver 27, which you might think is a fair price to pay until you see that he's going ahead of some of the names we've already been talking about. Going ahead of Tet McMillan. Going ahead of, I would say, Travis Hunter and George Pickens I'd rather have for value, and then all these other guys as we keep going lower. When you look at it across different positions, Zay Flowers is going right in the range of guys like George Kittle, Jalen Hurts across different positions. I'd rather have those elite tier players. And by the way, quickly hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to this channel. It helps the channel grow, reach more people, which allows me to put out even more content. I would love to get up to putting out 4 to 5 videos a week for you beautiful people. The next wide receiver we're talking about is one Jerry Jeudy. I mean, this is a guy who has a career high year in 2024. He made the Pro Bowl. He was absolutely dominant. If we look at it from a points per game perspective, let's look at it right here. 14.2 fantasy points per game, best of his career despite only scoring 4 touchdowns. touchdowns, but a lot of this had to do with one stretch and one person. It was a stretch during the middle of the season, and it had to do with the Jameis Winston's renaissance in Cleveland. Because from weeks 8 to 15, those 7 games last year, we end up seeing Jerry Jeudy come out here and average 21 fantasy points per game. Elite level numbers. 9.8 targets per game and over 112 yards per game. He was a top 5 wide receiver during this time, and he had at least 14 fantasy points, which is like a borderline top 12 finish, top 15 in 6 out of those 7 games. And if you had this guy in fantasy, whether you drafted him, got him off the waiver wire, you do not forget his week 13 game where he won you a week alone with 9 catches, 235 receiving yards. Yes, that was Jerry Jeudy thanks to a 70-yard touchdown at one point. Had the touchdown in that game, 13 targets. But look at this. This is how crazy the Browns offense was with Jameis Winston. You had Jerry Jeudy seeing 13 targets in a game. The exact same game you had 14 targets for Elijah Moore, 17 targets for David Njoku. I mean, when do you ever see box scores like this? It's because of Jameis Winston. But do you remember the weeks when Jameis Winston wasn't the quarterback for this team? I'm talking weeks 1 through 7 and weeks 16 through 18. You remember what happened for Jerry Jeudy during that time? Let me remind you. He averaged just 9.3 points per game. He finished inside the top 20 receivers just once and only had 1 touchdown during that time. He only was the wide receiver 70 when Jameis wasn't his quarterback. Tough. And now Jameis Winston is gone, and I hate to break it to you, but they didn't really replace him with anybody that you could feel happy about. The quarterback room right now has 4 guys apparently competing for the job. Joe Flacco, the veteran, seems like he should be the favorite. Kenny Pickett, they got this offseason. They drafted both Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. Right now, if you have 4 quarterbacks, you have absolutely no quarterbacks. Best case scenario is that you get Joe Flacco, and people remember Joe Flacco reviving the Browns and the Colts for a week or two here the past couple of the seasons, but in the majority of his games during that time, he was god-awful. And it's not going to help any of these quarterbacks, whether it's a rookie, whether it's Kenny Pickett who has struggled, or the aging Joe Flacco, with the fact that they have a terrible offensive line. 27th in pass blocking unit last year. They were bottom 5 in not only their overall blocking, but their sack rate, their pressure rate allowed. That's not going to help an older Joe Flacco or any of these rookies who would like some time to actually be composed and set their feet. The offensive environment is just disgusting. And then you also have to factor in, like, Cedric Tillman is still there. I don't think he's anything special, but he was during a stretch last year when healthy, a top 10 fantasy receiver averaging 76 yards per game for about a month of the season. Of course, there's David Njoku, who I think is the best overall player for fantasy where he goes in this offense. He's been a top 5 tight end in back-to-back years when healthy. In 2023, he ranked 3rd in targets with 123. Last year, he ended up seeing just great usage when actually out there and healthy. 7 or more targets in 8 out of 11 games when he actually started and completed those contests for David Njoku. And he's a guy who goes in round 10 to 11 of fantasy drafts, like 5 rounds later than Jerry Jeudy right now. It's crazy. So Jeudy is being drafted right now as the wide receiver 30 in fantasy drafts, a top 70 player. I mean, let's actually look at this. Instead of looking at it across the overall wide receiver landscape, let's look at this across different. He's going as a 6th round pick, 5 rounds earlier than his teammate David Njoku. Let's look at this right here. Across different positions right now, you're seeing him go across next to all these wide receivers. I think that's crazy. Definitely give me Isaiah Pacheco later. I'll even take TJ Hawkinson later. I'm scrolling even more. Like, there's a range here where we're already 20 picks below, and I would still consider taking guys like Khalil Shakur over him, especially when it comes into the value. Khalil Shakir, I'm sorry. Some people don't like it when I say Shakur. I get it. I apologize, Shakir. Now, if you made it this far, you're already ahead of like 90% of your league mates watching a video like this, getting schmacked by all this information because you're going to avoid drafting the wrong players when they're going to be drafting them instead. And you can get even more ahead of your league mates by just downloading that free top 50 overall rankings. It's completely free for now. It's linked down below, or you can head to fantasyrankingsfree.com. Now, if you want to see the running back version of this video, the running backs that you need to avoid this year, you're going to regret taking them, let your friends take them instead, well, that video is right here. YouTube thinks you'll like it. I definitely think you'll like it. You can check it out. I appreciate y'all watching, and I'll see you in that video.